You are listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality, the podcast where ancient wisdom meets modern vitality. If you're seeking to reconnect with your innate vibrancy, you're in the right place. I'm Emily Davis, a seasoned holistic esthetician and herbalist. Join me as we unlock the secrets of ancient skincare practices, explore the beauty of seasonal living, herbalism, and true holistic well-being for you and the broader ecosystem. Hey there. This episode is the final installment in my series about skincare products and the steps of a skincare routine. And it was really fun to start the podcast out with this series because I sometimes forget about talking about how beautiful skincare can be, which is funny being an esthetician who has my hands in skincare all day long. But I get so excited to share about all of the other things you can do that supports this organ, our connection to the outside world. And I think sometimes those things get lost in the monstrosity that is the conventional beauty industry that makes us think that the only way to find skin health is in a bottle. And so I sometimes leave out talking about what's in that bottle because that's certainly not true. And also, through doing this series, I have reconnected with how sacred skincare can actually be when we're working with the best ingredients, when we're honoring ourselves by selecting beautiful products that can support us on the inside and the out. I am going to be talking about SPF today, which also felt kind of difficult as I was putting together my talking points, because if you know me, you know that I am never the esthetician who supports fear-mongering around the skin. I never have been, I never will be. I think that it is a great disservice anytime I see rhetoric of this type being passed around. And I've always felt that our fear of the sun is toxic to our well-being, to our mental health, to our endocrine health, our bone strength, our vascular system, all of the things. And I'm very heartened to see that this paradigm is beginning to shift and that many are starting to see the light, so to speak, that the sun is our life force. Our ancestors knew this. There is a long history of sun healing and heliotherapy and even sun worship. But in the last, 100 years or so, since the modern scientific community has been demonizing the sun, melanoma rates have only increased. And additionally, a study published in the Journal of Internal Medicine found that avoiding sun exposure is a risk factor for all-cause mortality. It was observed that following sun exposure advice that's very restrictive is in fact harmful to our health. I will start this episode by noting that the ideas discussed here are never meant as personalized advice for you. I'm merely stating what works for me and my life, what I have observed in almost 2 decades of working with thousands of people's skin as an esthetician, my observations from my studies as an herbalist. My episodes are meant to be think pieces that you can then use your discernment to see what holds true for you. And if something doesn't resonate, that's perfect. Leave that and then take what does resonate. So today I'm going to talk about what SPF, what that moniker means. I'm going to talk about why it's classified as a drug rather than a cosmetic, and what that means for you as the consumer. I'm going to talk about the difference between chemical sunscreens and mineral sunblocks. I will discuss plants that provide elemental protection. And finally, I'll get into my own thoughts and habits when it comes to the sun and our cultural paradigm. So let's start out with, what does SPF mean and what do those numbers mean? SPF stands for sun protection factor. It's a measure of how well a sunscreen protects the skin from UVB rays. So you'll see different numbers on your sunscreen, like SPF 15, SPF 30, going all the way up to SPF 100. And so what that means, that number is that sunscreen is going to allow you to stay in the sun that number of times longer than you could without protection before getting sunburn. Let's say that you can go into the sun and not get burned after, or you start to get burned after 10 minutes. So you would now multiply 10 by the number on your SPF. So we'll take 15 as an example here. So 10 times 15 SPF will allow you to stay in the sun for 150 minutes. If it's a SPF of 30, it will double. So with an SPF of 30, you can stay in the sun for 10 times 30, 300 minutes. And then we get up into these higher SPF ratings. There's even 100 out there now. So let's look at that. You go in the sun, you don't burn for the first 10 minutes, and then you start to see that histamine reaction and you start to see the pinking of your skin. And so that's how long it's going to take you. Let's multiply that by an SPF of 100. That's 1,000 minutes where you do not have to worry, theoretically, you don't have to worry about getting burned by the sun. Well, how long is 1,000 minutes? That's 16 hours. So for me, that doesn't personally make a ton of sense. One, because sunscreen is meant to be reapplied every 2 hours because it degrades in sunlight. Maybe there's friction that's breaking it down. If you're out in the water, that's going to be breaking it down. Sweat, all of the things. And so really, you're never going to go 16 hours with your SPF of 100 continuing. And so, what does it mean that SPF is considered a drug? In many places, including the United States, sunscreen is regulated as an over the counter drug by health authorities such as the FDA. And this classification as a drug means that the sunscreen is subject to specific regulations and requirements governing their efficacy, their clinical testing, their marketing, the way that they're allowed to be labeled. And so for you as a consumer, this is just interesting to note that a product has to have specific labeling and specific ingredients for it to be considered an SPF here in the United States. In other countries, there are many other ingredients that are considered as a sunscreen that we do not allow within our regulation here in the United States. So, moving on, let's talk about chemical versus mineral SPF. We have chemical sunscreens and physical sunblock. A chemical sunscreen is going to contain compounds that work by absorbing UV radiation and converting it into heat, which is then released from the skin. Chemical sunscreens are typically transparent when they're applied. They tend to be a little bit more lightweight on the skin. They also tend to be much more aggravating to sensitive skin. And they also take time to activate once applied. So, this is the type of product that you have to wait, several minutes at least for it to activate according to the label. There are a couple of reasons that chemical sunscreens are not preferable to me. Some chemical sunscreen ingredients, such as oxybenzone and octinoxate, have been associated as potential hormone disruptors in animal studies. And while more research is needed to understand the implications for human health fully, someone who is concerned about potential hormone disruption, which has a domino effect on everything else in our body, may prefer mineral sunblocks. Number two, they have been shown for a potential to produce free radicals when exposed to UV radiation. Free radicals are highly reactive molecules with unpaired electrons that can cause damage to cells and tissues through oxidative stress. And this is precisely why we're trying to protect our skin from the sun, is because the sun does have the ability to produce, I should say excessive sun exposure does have the ability to produce free radical damage and oxidative stress within the skin. To be fair and to play devil's advocate, I will note that while some chemical sunscreen ingredients may undergo photodegradation when exposed to sunlight, the extent to which they form free radicals and the potential health implications after that are definitely still subject to much ongoing research and much debate within the scientific community. So I'll let you decide if putting something on your skin, and I'm truly not trying to sound condescending here, but it is silly. Like, why would we put something on our skin that has the potential to cause the effect that we're trying to avoid with putting it there? We're just putting these things on our skin to bake in the sun and potentially cause the problem that we're trying to avoid. Finally, it is apparent now that with ingredients in chemical sunscreen, they do lead to bleaching of the coral reef. And this has widespread effects across our entire ecosystem. The critical habitat of phytoplankton, which is the coral reef, plays a vital role in regulating our Earth's climate and our oxygen levels. And I do not want to note that sunscreen is not the main cause for bleaching of the coral reef. It's certainly not the only cause for bleaching of the coral reef. Destructive fishing practices and pollution are major contributors, but it has made such a significant impact that chemical sunscreens have been banned in Hawaii, in the Florida Keys, in many locations in Mexico, Aruba and Bonaire. Physical sunblocks, on the other hand, contain active mineral ingredients such as zinc oxide and or titanium dioxide. These minerals work by sitting on the skin and creating a physical barrier that's going to reflect and scatter the UV radiation away from the skin. So these are going to work immediately upon application. These are going to be a little bit thicker. They can be the ones that cause a white cast or sometimes pilling on the skin. And it should be noted, titanium dioxide can be a little bit controversial. Titanium dioxide can be more irritating to sensitive skin types. And then aerosol titanium dioxide has been shown to cause cancer, lung cancer in mice. And so we are seeing the release of an aerosol titanium dioxide in a product that is now being banned in the EU. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind. I certainly do not utilize powders that contain titanium dioxide. I have found a couple, I'm a very sensitive girl, and I have found a couple of titanium dioxide sunscreens that do not cause sensitivity for my skin. One that I am bringing into my online shop and my in-person shop is called Fora. And I've been really pleased with their formulation, and that has not caused issue for me. But if you are really sensitive, it's definitely something to keep in mind. Physical sunblocks when wearing SPF is my preferred option because there is less potential for hormone disruption. And it is important that we note that uh, nanoparticles of both zinc and titanium dioxide have also been found to cause or contribute to bleaching of the coral reef. And so you do want to make sure that you're utilizing products that are non nano versions of those minerals. Happily, there are also many plants that naturally offer sun protection to us humans. One is red raspberry seed oil. Red raspberry seed oil is rich in antioxidants and it's going to potentially help protect the skin from UV damage. There have been studies that suggest that it offers this level of protection against both UVA and UVB. So, again, these cannot be labeled in the United States as an SPF because of the regulations around an SPF and the fact that it is a drug, which allows for these regulations. Another beautiful oil that offers natural sun protection is carrot seed oil. Carrot seed oil contains carotenoids, particularly beta carotene, which can provide antioxidant protection against UV induced damage. Cranberry seed oil contains antioxidants, including vitamin E and phenolic compounds, which have been shown to have photoprotective properties. And then finally, jojoba seed oil is high in vitamin E, and some studies have suggested that it may have anti inflammatory effects and could potentially help reduce UV induced skin damage. It's important that we also discuss when we're talking about these plant oils that they're not going to work in the same way as an SPF does. There's a reason that they're not considered an SPF. They may need to be applied more sporadically, and they're not going to have, or excuse me, not sporadically. They may need to be applied more often, and they may not have the integrity that maybe like a zinc oxide would. And so it's not going to work time after time after time or be guaranteed to work in the same way that a zinc oxide would. So I love these oils. I've recently brought on a beautiful sun serum from a company called Laurel Skincare, which is one of my absolute favorite skincare products I've ever, or skincare lines that I've ever used. She has so much integrity in her formulations, and this product contains several antioxidant rich ingredients that will help with sun protection, but also with sun damage after the fact. And so this product is meant to be applied both prior to sun exposure and then after sun exposure. Another product that I do not carry in my shop, but that I've used and loved is Living Libations. They have an Everybody Loves the Sun oil, which is very similar. And so while these are not a replacement for SPF, I have very much enjoyed them in my own life and in my own intuitive sun care practices. So, with that being said, I'd love to move into our final topic of today, which is about how I practice intuitive sun habits. Our skin was intelligently designed for the sun. We have receptors that pick up on sunlight and create a domino effect that support our health in so many different ways. The sun has several frequencies. So we have red light, which, yes, that is the same red light that you are seeking out from a red light mask or a red light panel. Those are going to be a little bit more concentrated that you would get from the sun. And so those are going to provide different therapeutic doses, but it is still the same red light frequency. We also see infrared, which is highly beneficial for healing. And then even ultraviolet rays have benefit. Benefits of UV rays include vitamin D synthesis. This would not be possible without ultraviolet rays. Vitamin D plays such a crucial role in maintaining our bone health, for regulating our immune function, for supporting our well-being, for cholesterol metabolism. But it's not just about vitamin D. Like, that's amazing and awesome, but there's so many other benefits, including mood enhancement, circadian rhythm regulation, which then has, again, a domino effect on almost every aspect of our health, cardiovascular health. UV radiation may help to lower blood pressure by promoting the release of nitric oxide, which was coined as the miracle molecule when it was discovered back in the 90s. The people who discovered nitric oxide actually won the Nobel Prize for it. It's a big deal. And then we have increased blood flow, which is going to support just so many different issues in our body. It's going to reduce stagnation in our body. And so the sun, and specifically UV, has so many benefits. But when singled out and studied in a petri dish on cells, it does make sense that they would be harmful. It's kind of cool to understand that the sun is similar to eating like a whole food, and infrared rays are going to have an effect, and red light is going to have a healing effect and offset potential detriment of the violet rays. It's becoming more and more commonplace in mainstream science that we're understanding this benefit. We're understanding how good the sun is for us again. As I said, there's such a rich history of heliotherapy and light therapy, utilizing the sun in short bursts for healing. And I think we're starting to maybe come back to that. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. And also, overexposure to the sun can cause damage. Overexposure to water can cause damage. So, in my view, it's about utilizing our common sense. To me, avoiding the sun at all costs and slathering in sunscreen every single day, cloudy or not, indoors or not, doesn't feel like common sense to me. It feels like our separation from the sun is part of our overall misguided separation from nature. So, how can we remember that we're nature if we're constantly worried about one of the greatest parts of nature being the worst thing that we could possibly do? It's going to cause wrinkles, it's going to cause collagen degradation, all of these things, which can be true. But we can practice intuitive sun practices. We can listen to our body. We can understand that we can build up a solar callus during the months when the sun is less strong, so that we're less likely to burn on a July day when I haven't seen the sun since before last August. It's important to note that when our health isn't optimal, or when lifestyle practices aren't optimal, it can increase inflammation and increase the incidence of free radical activity in the body, and we're then more prone to damage from the sun. So, utilizing that common sense on the other side of the spectrum, where there's so many people out there throwing caution to the wind with the sun, doesn't really feel great. I envision this shift in our public health where we can begin to prioritize our feminine intuition in the matters of well being. And it doesn't matter if you're male or female, we all innately have a feminine intuition. And we move away from this prevailing masculine paradigm that we currently live under, with this tendency to dismiss our internal wisdom in favor of, in my opinion, an arrogant reliance on life. So, the way that I practice intuitive sun habits is, first, I consider where I am. Am I close to the equator? Am I at a high elevation? These are places where the sun is going to be stronger. I begin to develop my solar callus by exposing my skin to more and more sunlight during the winter and spring months. And this doesn't necessarily mean that I'm laying out all day, but I am spending short bursts of time without sunblock exposing my skin to sunlight. So 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And I also understand when I've had enough. I notice when my skin starts to pink. I know this is a histamine response that's telling me it's time for shade or to cover up with a hat or more layers. If I need to wear sunscreen because I know that I'm going to be outside in the middle of the day and I may potentially burn, I personally opt for a mineral sunblock. This feels like the best choice for me and for my body. Lifestyle also plays a factor in intuitive sun habits. Diets rich in inflammatory seed oils, like packaged food, can increase oxidative stress in the body, and diets that focus on whole foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids can reduce oxidative stress and inflammation. Additionally, diets that are rich in carotenoids can be supportive to the skin and our sun health. It's like my favorite way to think of this is noticing a houseplant turning yellow when it's getting too much sunlight. That comes from the plant naturally increasing its carotenoid content and reducing the chlorophyll, and it's doing this to protect itself from sun damage. We humans can utilize this intuitive damage protection by eating foods that are high in carotenoids. So these are foods like red, yellow, orange produce, like bell peppers, carrots, tomatoes, kale, watermelon, cantaloupe, butternut squash, apricots. All of these are very high in carotenoids. And although kale isn't necessarily yellow, you can think of eating these yellow foods just like you think of the plant turning yellow to give itself more sun protection. Reducing alcohol intake and other activities that put stress on the body will also support the body as it is exposed to environmental stressors. So, just thinking about all of these things that are contributing to stress and inflammation in the body, and then putting that body into the sun, which can be a stressor, may not be the best idea. I would invite you to take this information and decide if it's a fit for you personally, or if not, that's great. You know your body best. If it does resonate, that's also great. I hope that it has given you something to think about at least and brought you some greater awareness about SPF. I invite you to join me next week as I talk about jaw clenching. It's one of the biggest things that I get asked about. I would love to talk about how it affects your skin and what you can do about it. I will catch you next week.